Today in the studio we have singer and songwriter Maia Von Lekow. Born and raised in Nairobi to a German-Italian mother and Kenyan father, Maia has fused her unique heritage into her music, creating a fresh, acoustic sound that weaves jazz, funk, folk and blues imbued with Swahili flavour.
Which is a feeling that is sad, but I'm not really. I sleep at night, it is quiet, so quiet.
I'm George Assayas, founder of African Speakers and Artists, and I'd like to welcome you to our Trailblazer interview series. Maia Von Lekow, welcome to our AS+A studio. And I have to say, we're glad we caught you because you've been travelling a lot over the last couple of months. What have you been up to?
Well, thanks for having me, George.
Pleasure.
Firstly, we were in London quite recently, where I was performing at a festival called Africa Utopia.
Okay.
And that was the first time for me going to London and to the UK, so it was really an exciting time. And yeah, I had like several gigs, moved around London.
And if memory serves,
England.
I think I saw you on the BBC at one point.
BBC also,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was very lucky and yeah,
Good.
truly great.
Were you playing to the diaspora or were you playing to people that were unfamiliar with your music?
I think both. I think for the Africa Utopia, it was playing to a lot of diasporians. But then the other gigs in Birmingham and Nottingham and other parts of London, it was mainly to people who hadn't really heard of me before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's in the pipeline for you in terms of new music?
So for 2016, there's a lot going on. I've done a lot of electronic collaborations. Actually, one guy who I met in London, who is a producer, we've just worked on a new track, and then another guy from Nigeria, a guy from Chile. So there's a lot of kind of electronic tracks because it's also quite interesting to try and see what, put the feelers out, not just kind of singer-songwriter, but what else is there. So that's going on, and then also recording a new EP, hopefully end of January if it all works out to plan.
Book Maia now is the message, right? Okay, good luck with all of that. I look forward to hearing it. How would you describe your music? I mean, I know that you come from a sort of melting pot of cultures. You have a Italian-German mother, Kenyan father. You've lived and travelled all over East Africa. How would you describe your sound?
As a kid, I grew up listening to a lot of jazz music, so I think that's definitely a big influence in my sound. And also the fact that I didn't really listen to a lot of African music until much later on in life. So now what's interesting is trying to figure out this kind of like puzzle as to still doing this kind of very contemporary like jazzy, I don't know, folkish, whatever you want to call it, and then also then incorporating a lot more African sounds. So through the documentary that I'm making, which is obviously another long story, but through that I'm also learning a lot about the music from the coastal area, because that's my father's heritage.
Okay.
So this album coming up in January, and also like several other kind of plans in the works, is to try and figure out how can I get in touch with and how can I learn much more from the coastal music to then be able to also incorporate that to make a unique sound. Okay. So that's,
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. And is that also some of the collaborations you're going to be doing? Is that going to...
Also, some of the collaborations will be, elderly musicians from well, now the word interior, now I understand, like deep Kilifi County. Okay. And then also young musicians from here.
Using various new instruments that people might not be familiar with?
I think it's various new instruments. I think for me as a singer-songwriter, my way of writing music has been very standard. It's been very kind of like verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. Yeah. Whereas with a lot of African music, it's kind of much more call and response, and you don't necessarily have to have these kind of different, like segments. And so that's been really interesting to try and learn more about that. Also to learn more about lyrically and what they're singing about, be it harvest, be it rain, be it whatever, and how do you kind of incorporate that with still trying to talk about issues which are relevant today.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of themes do you touch on in the lyrics of your songs?
Everything, really. I talk about, love, of course.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
Love, about, coming from both of these scopes, both, and not necessarily even just black and white, people who've been living overseas, who try and come back here, they don't really feel like they fit there, they don't feel like they fit, so just trying to find kind of the space as to where I most fit. And so that's one of the big ones, kind of personal introspection, whatever you want to call that. And then also a lot of stuff about domestic violence, a little bit about politics, a little bit about, you know, the young people and how, you know, we need to kind of like start figuring out. I'm saying myself young, God, I'm turning 33 soon, but yeah.
If you're old, then I'm not going to say what I am. But I think your music really resonates with people. I mean, I personally have heard you perform at the beach, on safari somewhere, I think venues all over Nairobi, and you've got a really, really loyal fan base, certainly here locally, who absolutely love your music and you know, can't get enough of you. And I'm sure that everyone's going to be looking forward to your new music coming out next year.
As am I, yes. Finally.
So as part of this series, we're interested in this kind of Africa Rising narrative and how it's, and this kind of explosion in entrepreneurship and innovation and how it applies to the various people that we interview. And of course, in your case, it will be music. I mean, do you see Africa as the next frontier for music, as is the case, it seems, in so many other industries?
I think so. I think, like, even, you know, just being in the UK and being in Amsterdam the last few months, you can really see that everyone's really looking into Africa for new ideas, for new things going on, and how can they play a role in what's happening in Africa. So I think it is a really great time to be here. I also think that creatively, like, we can see it's booming all over, the tech, the music, the film, and so to be part of this kind of boom is also really exciting, because also, like, performing a lot outside, a lot of people are like, oh, we haven't really heard much music from East Africa. We hear a lot from West Africa, but we don't hear a lot from East Africa. So I think now is a really exciting time, because we have a lot of musicians who are really putting Kenya on the map musically.
So it's interesting. So a lot of new music coming out, and new talent emerging from East Africa, and as you say, traditionally West Africa was, I suppose, the place where most familiar international musicians would come from. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and I also think that we have a little bit of an identity crisis as Kenyans, and I think it's only now that guys are really starting to figure out, because I think from a musician's perspective, a lot of us were listening to a lot of Western music, because most of the radios were just playing Western music. So from there, then it's only now that we're trying to figure out how can we then make this original, unique, and something that Western audiences would still like to hear, and something that obviously also African audience would also want to hear. So I think that's been the challenge, you know, is trying to figure out, and whatever, if that's hip hop, if that's reggae, if that's electronic, I think a lot of the musicians now are really trying to, like, are finding their their spaces.
Their niche and their space. And do you think the festival scene here is growing in parallel to new and emerging talent? Because I know that there was a much-loved festival in Zanzibar called Sauti za Busara. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Which sadly shut down. I don't know exactly the reasons why, but you know, do you feel that there are enough festivals to give new and emerging talent a platform to reach audiences?
I think Sauti za Busara, firstly, in Zanzibar, I think it's really unfortunate. So they closed down, and they're hopefully going to then reopen or restart in 2017. The reason for that is because mainly most of their funders were from Europe. Obviously, with the economic crisis there, then now it's, you know, it's really, it's suffering. And I think that the good things with those kinds of festivals is that they're really bringing in people from all over Africa and supporting the East African market. So it was a really great platform. I played there in 2010, and I think it was like the first big show that we had. I think in terms of festivals in Kenya and Uganda, there's a lot going on for festivals, which I think is pretty exciting. And Kenya, there's Safaricom Jazz, I think right now is the biggest, but I think all of these festivals, or most of these festivals, have money already behind them. And I think that's the big challenge, because I know a lot of festival organizers, and I think they're all kind of struggling with that financial aspect. So
the brands really need to support the music scene, and there's a big opportunity for them to do so.
Completely.
And Safaricom seems to be leading the way, as always, with these things. This series of interviews is called the Trailblazer series, and as a Trailblazer, what do you think is in store for us as the next big thing in East African music in 2016?
What is in store?
That's a little bit of an abstract question, but is there any one thing that's going to emerge in 2016 which we should be excited about?
Well, I didn't really know about the one thing. I know many things just in terms of, you know, people in the creative industry, just kind of just pushing. And I think that 2016 there's going to be even more awesome things than there were in 2015, 2014.
I'd agree. I think there's better studios, there's better facilities, there's a bigger demand for live music, there's more venues for live music, and hopefully all of that together is going to make 2016 an interesting year, not just in Kenya, but beyond.
Yeah.
Would also like to understand your musical influences and who your heroes and heroines are. If you were to go to a festival tomorrow and you could choose your perfect festival lineup, dead or alive, who'd it be? Give me 3 people.
Hard question, that one. All right. First person who I've been listening to recently, who I absolutely love, actually I've been listening to him for a long time, but just refreshed, is Kezia Jones from Nigeria.
Okay.
And who else? Nina Simone.
Of course. Yeah.
And lastly, Ali Fakature.
Great. Well, Maia, thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome, George.
And we're really looking forward to hearing your new music coming out early next year. All right. Thanks, Maia. Thank you.